Okay, well, this is the first video in a short series. The series is called Tinfoil Hat Time because the topics I'm taking on here I think are very easily put down by non-Bible believers and people that actually haven't looked into these topics, but there's more and more and more evidence that these are real. And so again, as we've done on this site, we're going to start with the Bible and take a look at passages. Then we'll come back and probably intersperse a couple of videos that demonstrate some of the evidence that's coming to light. And then we'll take another part of this series and again a couple more videos. And the two things I want to get into, although they're related, is this idea of the Nephilim and then the current phenomenon that everybody talks about, which is the UFOs. And the reason why they're together, I'll try and make clear as we go along. We are promised when we come into the tribulation period that God's going to send a great delusion so that even the elect may maybe believe. And so many people think that this great delusion is somehow tied to genetics and the reemergence of hybrid species and UFOs. And that sounds completely out there, but from a biblical standpoint, let's take a look at some of these passages from the Bible. Say, is that plausible? And then as we drill in, we'll again look for physical evidence and other things that say, that it's very likely a sign that we're in the end times. So with that, we're going to tackle the first subject, which is the notion of these humans or human hybrids that were called the Nephilim. And the Nephilim is also translated giants. And we'll see in a minute here that the Bible has a lot to say about it. I think one of the most famous ones is Goliath from the Old Testament Bible story of David and Goliath. And we'll see that as well as a whole bunch of other references. So with that, let's get going on tinfoil hat time. First off, people are aware of the David and Goliath phenomenon in the Bible, but if you look, and I'm not even sure I got them all, but if you look, there's lots and lots of references to these giants, and we're going to clear up a couple of other things about the Bible as we go through here. So there's more than one reason to do this. Now I'm going to use the New King James Version. Pick the New King James Version so that the language isn't 18th century old Europe, but it stays pretty true to looking at these passages as we go through. And in our second video coming up, where I drill in, possibly make the linkage to the UFO phenomenon, I'm going to be using the Greek translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint, and it was actually done in the 200s BC time frame, and I'll explain why I do that when I get there. Okay, so let's come down, and the very first thing we want to take a look at is the wickedness and judgment of man. So the setting, we're in Genesis, and we're just prior to the flood, and it's God making his pronouncement that he's going to bring a flood upon the earth and destroy man. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply in the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent and thought of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he made man on earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, who I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air. I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Okay, so as usual, there's probably more even in this short set of passages than what could be done in a Bible study where we go through each specific line and try and get full meaning. But we're looking for a theme here, which are these giants or these Nephilim. And the first thing is there's two repeats of this issue where men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them. And then we see that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and that's repeated down here again as well. The sons of God came into the daughters of men and bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. And so that's an interesting phrase. Sons of men in Hebrew was B'nai Elohim. And B'nai Elohim, the classic comparison passage actually in Job, but it is very clearly angels. So this is the part that gets kind of hard to believe, is angels mating with human women, creating people or children that now are called giants on the earth. And this is a little time frame reference too here. So there were giants created on the earth before the flood and afterward, and also afterwards. So something is going on here where angels mated with women, created people on earth. We'll see that God considered them continually wicked, and he decided to destroy all flesh, both people and beasts and birds. And then he said that this would exist afterwards as well, and that would be after the flood. So wow. One other connotation down here that we want to highlight is those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. And it's interesting, and there's lots of documentation to this, that the story of these giants that were a cross between deity and man are in every ancient culture across the whole globe. And so that you don't have to take my word for when you start digging into this whole issue of they're called Nephilim. If you start looking into that for your own, it appears in every ancient culture, these things, including into the United States and the Ohio Valley and out to the coasts in California and all the way down into Mexico. So this is a worldwide phenomenon that these giants existed. Okay, so let's roll down a little bit. So then the Lord saw that wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent and thought of his heart was only evil continually. And he was sorry he made him. So he decides, I will destroy man who I've created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing and birds of the air. I am sorry that I made them. So it's interesting because we're going to see after the flood the repeat of these giants being on earth. And when Moses leads the Jewish people out of Egypt and going to the promised land, who do they run into? But they run into giants. And as Moses then dies and Joshua's going to take the people into the promised land, and they begin to have more and more battles with these giants, God always says to kill all of the men, women, and children, all of them. But he also sometimes says kill all the animals and everything else. And so if what we're seeing here is a problem with the genetics were changed, and so these hybrids between the angels and humans created these ghastly things that the Lord destroyed with the flood. It also said that he was doing it to not only get rid of man and beast and creeping thing and birds from the air. So there probably was something that was causing a genetic problem across most of the living creatures on earth. And this makes sense because Satan's goal, if he can destroy what God had created by altering the genetics, he can't have a redeemer of man because it isn't man anymore, it's something else. And so the story starts to fit together as we come into the end of the age. But let's just take a look at this last sentence right down here and see that this is the Bible's best way of talking about genetics. So verse 9, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. And the implication here, most people just pass it by and say, well, that God liked or was pleased with Noah and his sons and the like. But now we look back, hindsight being 2020, and understand that this probably had something to do with genetic manipulation or genetic pollution. Being perfect in your generation probably means that Noah was the last, or him and the people that get on the ark may have been the last ones that had DNA that was original, descent from Adam. So wow, there's a lot there. Now we're going to scan through a bunch of these passages and only stop at some interesting things. I tried to record them all just in case you wanted to go back and take a look for yourself. The next one, though, that we're going to drill into, and I try to kind of keep these in order, is this issue of Nimrod. Now, in both the prior video series, I talked about at the end of the age, I believe what's happening is the world's coming full circle. First, from Satan's standpoint, he's going to reestablish his, quote, kingdom on earth and his religious practices. And so we see the Antichrist in control of the earth with 10 regional kings and a one world religious system that hates God. Okay, that's in Revelation 13, 17, and 18. But I think it's, if we trace back the one world, the only other one world program, it was here with after Nimrod and his wife Semiramis set up the false religious systems that are the root or the mother of all pagan systems ever since. So it's interesting here. Let's take a look at Nimrod. Nimrod was one of the direct descendants now of Noah, so we're post-flood, and Nimrod began to be a mighty one on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And again, you could pass right over that verse and think, well, everybody would have been a hunter in these days, but that language is very reminiscent of I'm trying to go back here and just to show you a quick in Genesis 6. So the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men of old, men of renown. And the reason why I bring that up is it ties so directly to this issue of the Nephilim that we saw prior to the flood, and now we start to see Nimrod after the flood. And when we get to some of the videos of the evidence that support this notion, there's extra biblical sources that seem to confirm what we're seeing here, and we'll just leave it at that for now. The other interesting thing is, what did Nimrod do? Well, he was the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, which is very famous from the Bible, where he tried to create a one world government with the Tower of Babel, which was really, it was trying to create a gateway into heaven. And then you can see all these cities that created in the land of Shinar, which would be today's, mostly today's Iraq. And from that land, he also went to Assyria and built Nineveh and Roth and Rezin and Nineveh and Calah. And so it's very, very interesting that you can see Nimrod started building this world empire. And a lot of historians now are starting to wonder if Nimrod didn't actually go all the way down and across into Egypt and was potentially Egypt's first pharaoh over the united land of Egypt. So again, a little bit of speculation there, but there could be some archaeological support for this whole notion of Nimrod as the world ruler right after the flood. Okay, now we're going to quickly look, we're skipping ahead in time a bit, and like I say, we're looking at the children have come up behind Moses out of Egypt, and they get the first look into the promised land, and here's what happens. Moses sent spies out to go investigate the land, and the spies come back and they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people who we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Anak came from the giants, and they were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Okay, so I want you to hang with me a bit on this one. So this is our first glimpse of now the children of Israel coming to the promised land, and they see these giants, and there's another important detail in here. That's a land that devours its own inhabitants. They were cannibalistic, which is going to have a lot of ramifications, probably more outside the Bible into what we may be seeing today as much as inside of the Bible. But just put that in the back of your mind. And they were of great stature, the descendants of Anak, and a lot of people talk about the Anakim, who were giants. And if we study this a little bit more, we'll see that. Okay, let's roll down. And who's the first wicked dude that we see is King Og. And they turned and went up by the way of Bashan. So Og, king of Bashan, went out against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. Then the Lord said to Moses, do not fear him. So we're seeing basically this is our first attack before the children of Israel make it all the way around to cross the Jordan to go in to claim their land. He runs into King Og on the east side of the Jordan. Okay, so that's the context. Do not fear him, for I have delivered him into your hand with all his people and his land. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites. Hey, there we go, another one, who dwelt in Heshbon. So they defeated him, his sons, and all his people until there was no survivor left. And they took possession of the land. So this is key. And let me just highlight this right now, is a lot of people say, how can you worship this God of the Bible? He's just as bad as any despot dictator. He had the children of Israel completely kill everybody, and how can he be a loving God? Well, I think now we start to get a little bit more sense as to why specifically the children of Israel were told to wipe these people out and not leave any women, children, everything, wipe them out. This was Satan's attempt to genetically recreate these crossbreed giants. And where did they show up? In the promised land that God told the Jews that they were to inherit. Satan clearly went in and intentionally loaded up the land full of these hybrids. And now we see God telling the children of Israel, I'm with you, go wipe every one of them out. And so there's your explanation for how can the just and living God have told the Israelites to kill man, woman, and child when they entered the promised land. So it was fair. Okay, Numbers 24. We're not really going to read this here because it's a whole nother video in and of itself, but all I can say is we're probably looking at here kings of the Nephilim kingdoms in this land, I'll generically call Canaan, and we'll leave that go for a whole nother video, but it gets really, really interesting. So Numbers 24, and we'll have to come back to it. And then Deuteronomy 3:11, we see now that basically the same retelling here of this battle with the king of Bashan, and the same command to go take Bashan and attack them until no survivors are remaining. And they took all the cities, and they went right through and they utterly destroyed them, as they did with this other king. So again, there's a series of these kings that were all probably this Nephilim crossbreed problem. And they killed them all, men, women, and children. And in this case, they left the livestock. Okay. And here we get the report that at the time we took the land from the hand of the two kings of the Amorites who were on this side of the Jordan, from the river Arnon to Mount Hermon. So you can see they're on the east side of the Jordan where they ran into these kings. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Indeed, his bed was an iron bedstead, and 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits was its width. And there's debates about how big is a cubit, but we're probably looking at maybe 12, 13, 14 foot long bed. Now, what's interesting is this King Og is actually demonstrating likely these kings before the flood were even bigger. These Nephilim were even taller, and again, outside the scope of what we're doing here in this Bible study, they could have been 20 or 30 or 40 foot tall originally, and now they're being bred down. And whether that's just through successive breeding or interbreeding with humans, or whether that was intentional, they're being bred down somewhat. Okay, Deuteronomy 3:13, we just get more reference here to where these kings were in this land of Bashan, also called the land of the giants. Okay, and now Joshua. So this is the, according to the Bible stories, this is now the Israelites go into and start taking over the promised land. And at that time, Joshua came out and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron to Debir, from Anab, and all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza, in Gath, and Ashdod. So let's take a look at this. Go look at a map. I didn't do this for here, but you can go see where the mountains of Israel are. We're, just put this way, we're east of Gaza and Gath and Ashdod, which were bordering on the Mediterranean. So as Joshua crossed in with the children of Israel, they cleaned out all of these Nephilim tribes and killed them, and the only thing that was left was along the coastlands, and I think most people today know where Gaza is, but on the eastern side of Israel were the only place where they remained. And in biblical days, that eastern region was the land of the Philistines. So here we go. And now it happened afterwards that war broke out in Gezer with the Philistines, at which I can't even pronounce some of these names, who was one of the sons of the giants, and they were subdued. Again, there was war with the Philistines, and again, they picked off another Lami, which was the brother of Goliath. Okay, here we know that guy. The Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. So you can see that these weren't just big hulking people, but they were actually capable of being warriors. They were the mighty men of old, it said, before the flood, and we see them, able to array in battle here. And yet again, there was war with Gath, and there was a man of great stature. Now check this out: with 24 fingers and toes, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot. And he also was born of the giant. And so this is really important. Now, when we start looking for archaeological evidence, one really interesting thing is a characteristic of these, quote, giants is just this, is they have 6 fingers and 6 toes and a double row of teeth. So it ties in exactly with what we're seeing in the Bible. And I guess it's just, we start with something that's very hard to believe at the outset, and we'll see now with some of the archaeological evidence that what the Bible says is actually true. So these were born of the giant in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David, by his servants. So at the time of David, it was 1000 BC, and so they were fighting in, Joshua was in the 1400s BC, like 1300s BC. So there's a couple of hundred years in here where they were claiming the land and fighting these giants. I'm going to keep skipping down here. Another reference to a mighty man. Okay. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits. Now the king of Og was, I think, 9 cubits, we learned earlier. So again, we're a few hundred years later, and it's gone from, they were 9 cubits before, and now we're 6 cubits. Most people see that Goliath was probably around 9 foot, 10 foot tall. And again, he was heavily armored, and his staff was like a weaver's beam again. So they were capable of carrying armament that was multiple times more potent than what a normal sized human could. And there's a little interesting thing here in Champion's battle in the ancient biblical times. People always thought that their gods were with the warriors, and so it came to be that they would select one person from each side, and those two individuals would fight, and knowing that their God was with them, whoever died demonstrated that their God of that people was stronger than the God of the other people. And so when puny little David came up against Goliath the giant, and he really was a giant, it was also a test of whether the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob / the Jews was stronger than this giant and his God. And that's a little background to backstory to that whole David and Goliath scene. Okay, let's keep coming down here. And we just get more in 2 Samuel of another giant and how big they were. Of course, we see how many times this is repeated in the Old Testament. This wasn't just one little reference in Genesis 6. This was the issue for hundreds of years for the Jewish people, battling these giants that were in the land. Okay, and there was war at Gath, and another reference here, a man of great stature who had 6 fingers and 6 toes. I think this is Samuel is actually the parallel passage to the Chronicles passage, because Chronicles was a recap of the years of these kings, and so it's probably this reference to the same situation. And then another quick review, and we're almost done. In Amos, Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before him, whose height was the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks, yet I destroyed his fruit above and his roots beneath. And so we get a little insight here into what was going on. Um, God is saying that he supercharged the Israelites when they went into the land of the giants, and it was him basically fighting through the Jewish people that cleared out all of these giants. It's an interesting reference to the height of the cedars. Now that might just be hyperbole and kind of a way of telling a story, but there is plenty of people who question that maybe the height of some of these giants, uh, like the Tales of Gilgamesh, which was back in the time of Nimrod, they really may have been about the size of trees, and that would have been just post-flood. Okay, all the way up to New Testament time. So if you think the stories in the Old Testament were just that, stories that were verbally retold through the years and they had no basis in fact, I think a lot of people like to make that critique of the Bible, which is totally false. We see in New Testament times here, Peter, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. And I just pulled out this one little verse here. The angels that God didn't spare who sinned were these angels that interbred with the early human race. And so that was the judgment God put on those fallen angels that did this. And then it's repeated again in Jude. And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. And we know the great day is the tribulation period. And one of the things we see in the chapters in Revelation, I forget which chapter, but there was angels bound in chains under the Euphrates River for that day and that hour. A lot of people say that potentially some of those references may be to unleashing the same evil demons and angelic horde back on earth in the time of this 7-year tribulation period. Okay, that wraps up our study. It was a bit of a long one, but I just wanted to impress the point that this whole notion of Nephilim or giants being hybrids is very biblical, and we'll see in some videos that we attach into this series that there's some archaeological evidence to this, and that, remember, not only the height of being big, but we also have the 6 fingers and 6 toes thing just documented for us right in the Bible. Okay, thank you.